Bob, would you like to lead us in the pledge, please?
Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Let the record show that all council members are present. Tony, is there any correspondence?
No, Your Honor.
At this time, we'll have comments from the public. Public is invited to come up to the podium and speak on any topic that you bring to the council's attention, and please limit your, please give us your name and your address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. The only person who signed up so far is Alex White.
Good evening. Dear council members, my name is Alex White. I am a developer of a project known as Zenith Viewpoint, which consists of a total of 5 condominiums, 4 of them being a residential, 1 is a commercial unit. The address is 23840 7th Avenue South, and it's building A and B. And it's located directly across from a landmark building. Tonight, I would like to ask you to request for you to instruct city staff to prepare an ordinance to modify existing use of a single condominium unit from a commercial to residential. A little bit of a history about our project. Sometimes in 2001-2002, we started the project. Through the process, it took us about 8 years to get approvals, during which time we had a lot of challenges and obstacles to overcome. The biggest challenge was that several council members decide not to follow the zoning, not to follow the opinion of a city staff and what the property was zoned for, but rather followed the emotions of our neighbors, and that was the result of about 8 years or so of fight. We finally was able to come to an agreement with the city staff to construct existing project, and it's ended up being different than we was anticipating, both in size and density, but we ended up building what we have right now. When we did purchase this property, the property was both not in compliance and it had numerous problems with the building department, fire department. It was vacant. It was an eyesore to a neighborhood. And the taxation that property that was produced in total was less than what it is producing right now from each individual unit. So I think we've done a fairly good job by delivering a product that both now is something that we can be proud of, as well as the being a great source of income for the city. The 4 units that are residential, they're now all sold. We, even in this challenging times, we're able to deliver a product that was sellable, and the only one that we have left right now is a 1,700 square feet office space, which is a condominium office space. We do have a lot of interest as a residential, but almost none as the commercial. In addition, the neighbors have requested for me to come and speak in front of you to get a request for a change where this particular unit can be also used as a residential, as it will meet the current neighborhood and the character and be consistent with the other units, as well as it will limit the traffic on site. I mean, there is enough commercial properties that are available, that are vacant in downtown Des Moines along Pacific Highway South. And we believe that with your permission and guidance to have city staff to prepare ordinance that will allow us to have the change of use from commercial to residential, we'll be able to fulfill, get this thing either sold or occupied and be consistent with both neighborhood and the other properties that surrounding our commercial unit. The commercial unit is only 1,700 square feet, so it's not going to be anything out of the contest of what the other size of the units in the same building. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a question, Dave. So this, obviously, this has come before us before. I guess my question is, how, kind of refresh my memory a little bit, how did that come down?
What we have is a building that was built on a piece of property that has the designation Neighborhood Commercial, NC. Very unique zoning designation in the city. There's only 3 properties that have that designation.
Right.
The one that Mr. White owns, the one you are physically in right now, and then the Redondo store down in the Redondo neighborhood. The way the zone is put together, a straightforward multifamily residential use is not allowed. But commercial uses or a combination of residential and commercial, a mixed use, is allowed. So if council would like to take a look at some options for Mr. White's property so he can change that unit from a commercial space to a residential space, I see 2 options. One would be to include the use of multifamily as a use in neighborhood commercial, or change his zoning designation to a resident or a mixed-use residential designation. Either one of those are doable, and we're happy to take a look at that if that's the direction of staff. Or
Well, I'd like to direct staff to do that if I have support of the council on it.
I would support that.
Okay? So if you would, Tony,
Seems to be.
Yep, so
I'd like to look at-
what we can do is
let
we
the
can bring-
council review both options.
Yes, we can bring forward to you the issues with both options, what are the pluses and minuses, and we'll put that on the work plan.
All right, thank you.
I have one more
have
question.
One
Oh,
question,
please,
too.
Carmen.
Was that because, was that the site that used to be the old Zenith store?
Yes.
So that's left over from long ago when there was an old grocery store
It
there?
used to be both the little grocery store, and then there was a couple residential units in it as well, so that's why it got that zoning designation.
I remember when we zoned it, actually.
Well, I think that was my question, is that I realize it was one time a grocery store with the owners living in back, but one time Zenith was a town, and now, so I obviously wasn't on the council at the time this was zoned to allow for the condominium to be built. I'm curious what zoning discussions took place at that time. Was this issue addressed at that time? Is it?
The way, and I don't recall when this zone was assigned to this site. I think it was there for many, many years. The council did do a total review of the zoning code in the late 90s, and they looked at this site, and they decided to leave or create the NC zone on that site, I don't recall which, because it matched the use that was there. But they didn't want it to be a multifamily, pure multifamily, I do recall that.
That's correct.
Because that is not the zoning in the rest of the neighborhood, even though the property immediately to the south is the old Zenith post office. Thank you. And that has been converted into apartments, so that has a multifamily use on it as well.
And you're correct there. We did, what we did, the action we took was in the late 90s was to make it an NC zone. And I remember that debate quite well.
We have direction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who didn't sign up who would like to speak? Okay. Seeing none, board and committee reports. And we'll start with Carmen.
Well, again, we're a little early for very many meetings to have occurred yet this year. So last Saturday, our last meeting, I spoke about last Saturday's sailboat race. And for those of you who missed it, it was marvelous. There were no rain. It was a bright day, not sunny, but not wet, not windy. Of course, that didn't help the sailboats, but I counted 67 of them, and I probably didn't count them all. And there were 4 to 8 or 10 people on each one. The place was just filled with color. Many of them had their spinnakers out, which are the big billowy sails with all the bright colors. And I think it's important for people to realize how many things are there to be seen at our marina during the off-season. Right now, a lot of winter birds, a lot of varieties are in the water down there and up on the totems. And it's just a great place to go on one of these days where we have reasonable weather and the rest of the country has deep, deep snow. Yesterday was the first meeting this year of the Des Moines Arts Commission with Nancy Stefan chairing it. And that group will be meeting the second Wednesday of each month at 4 p.m. Up at the Senior Activity Center. The public is always welcome, and if there are any people who would enjoy volunteering, they can always use volunteers on the Performing Arts and Visual Arts committees. They're most welcome. It's it's a delightful group full of great ideas, really a wonderful part of what our city has working for it. And next Monday, which is the Martin Luther King holiday, the 16th, there will be a work party at Sanju Gardens. So even in the winter time, there are things that need to happen in garden areas. And we have had marvelous participation with the community partners and volunteers. This is almost 10 acres that was donated to the city by a family that has been turned into a place that provides garden space, extra food for the food bank, a place for people to gather and help. They've cleaned up the orchard. They've just done all kinds of marvelous work there. It's a real community effort and a great thing to be involved in. So that's happening starting at 9 a.m. on Monday for anyone who'd like to come help out. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Bob?
Yes, I'm very happy to announce that last week I did absolutely nothing, therefore I have nothing to report.
Thank you. Jeanette?
Well, I can't say I did nothing, but I don't have anything to report either. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't say that I did nothing, but I also have nothing to report.
Okay. Matt?
I did do something. Okay, so over the past week, there have been a couple of meetings that I attended. One was with the North Hill Community Club, and that was on Tuesday night. And I was there with Councilmember Burge and Caldwell. There was an email that went out inviting people to come and listen and to give that forum a chance to express some, what things they'd like to see happen in the city. And I took a few notes. So I thought I'd share those with the rest of the council. One of the concerns was although they acknowledge that if you call the police, they come, and that they're very responsive, and there were a couple people who spoke very positively about our police department. There was a desire to have cruisers go across the hill, a little bit more often. They'd like to see a little bit more visibility. There was some conversation over the increase of lease rates at the marina, especially the one that's been in the paper lately. And since we'll talk about that later, I don't think I need to go much further with that. And there was some conversation around the garbage rates with our new vendor, Cleanscapes. And again, there's topics on the agenda tonight, so we don't need to go there. Last couple of things were minor. They wanted to see us improve the sound system here at City Hall. Can you hear me now? And there was a pump at the senior center that they would, that I guess powers a fountain out and back, and they would like to see some things going there. And they did mention that, Bob, you had been working on that, and
Yeah.
wondered about the status of it.
Actually, I'll refer it over to Tony because I know the status is that they're trying to do it in the spring rather than now because of the work crews.
And I was talking to the city attorney, so I missed the question.
Okay, you
Sorry.
remember the item I brought up to your attention regarding the
Oh, yes.
pond at the senior center, that the pump is out of order?
It is in the work plan, and it's going to be taken care of in the spring. One of the issues is there's a little bit more digging that needs to be done in order to do the work. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dick. And that work will be much easier to do in the spring when it's not so cold and wet.
Great. So that was as much as was addressed there. And then Wednesday night was the first meeting of the Suburban Cities Public Issues Committee, and was very well attended. We have a new chair that's we'll see. Maybe I shouldn't talk about the pick. Anyway, Mia Gregerson from CTAC is our new chair, and there were a fair number of new faces, and we also have a new director, Deanna Dawson, and this was her second meeting, but her first meeting was, she'd only been in the position for 2 weeks, so they're working very closely to kind of review the goals and make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what the function is of the organization and so forth. They've even talked about a couple of what we've referred to as away games, where right now we meet in the city of Renton because it's generally, it's fairly central to most cities, but there are some cities that to have their representatives get to the meeting, they still have to go quite a distance. So they're looking at something like that. The biggest topic of discussion, there were several of them, but rather than go through all of them, that may have an impact, and I think we need to keep an eye on, is that the King County Wastewater Treatment Division is taking a look at wastewater overflow. So whenever we have a heavy rain, the treatment plants sometimes are not capable of handling and processing all the wastewater. So you'll see on the news periodically where that there's an overflow into streams or various tributaries or whatever. So there is, they noted that the King County Executive Office will make some recommendations on the plan to the Metro King County Council in early April, and that the Regional Water Quality Committee will review the plan and take action, scheduled sometime in August. The thing that's important to this, I think, and I need staff to be aware and hopefully follow up on this, is that the cost of it is estimated to hit the King County ratepayers in total at about $711 million. And it means a monthly wastewater bill for the county and the entire King County wastewater service area could increase by an estimated $7.61 by 2030. So it could be a significant hit to all of our residents if, in fact, we are covered by the 14 remaining uncontrolled CSO locations. So,
And as far as I know, we are not. We are covered by sewer districts. We are not part of Metro. So there might be a corner or two of the city here and there, but I believe that we will not be affected by that rate increase.
I hope you're right. But
We can certainly call our sewer districts and find out.
yeah, I just want to make sure that it's not something like, you know, where we have garbage collection and if the King County rates to haul away the disposal go up, that it won't affect us, things like that. So want to make sure that we're just keeping our eye on it. Then the last thing they offered, and I don't know if, Tony, have you received the 2012 SEA Appointments, Regional Boards and Committees document?
I saw a draft copy of it last week, was not given a copy of it.
Well, I'm happy to leave mine here. They did an excellent job putting together for all of us. They always put out the list that says who's on the regional boards and their appointments, but they have also put together with full color photos of all the people and the mission statement of each one of the committees and so forth and what their action plans are. So I think it'd be good for the city to have.
And if you look at the list you have there, you'll see the assistant city manager is a representative for SCA to the Committee to End Homelessness.
I did notice that. So anyway, so I will leave this with you, Tony, to have here, and we can get more copies if we need them. That concludes my remarks.
Okay. Melissa?
On Saturday, Councilmember Pena and I attended the Highline Healthy Community Coalition. We meet the first Saturday of each month, the electeds from Des Moines, SeaTac, Normandy Park, Burien, and the Highline School Board. And kind of the one takeaway from that meeting was that we're going to drop the healthy from our name and instead remain the Highline Community Coalition, in part because the HEAL grant came from a partnership between Burien, Des Moines, and the school board. And the thought being that because they were already trying to come up with some conscious ways to work collaboratively, we were able to obtain this great federal HEAL grant for our communities. And in what other ways can we make an impact with our lawmakers if we say we're working together as a coalition of communities for joint projects that can benefit all of our municipalities? So now we're kind of moving away as the grant and the efforts of the grant kind of wrap up in March. I always feel when we walk away from the meeting, it's a really productive and positive atmosphere in the room. We're, talking about everything from sound transit to aging in place to walkable streets, even something as simple as the intersection at 200th and Des Moines Memorial Drive. Is that how, if we have SCORE is another example of when our cities work together in a positive way, how we can we all have similar problems and how can we have the best outcome on our goals. So that was kind of the main topic of our conversation on Saturday. And to that end, you can all free up your Thursday, January 19th. I know you were all planning on attending our kind of summit of all of what we had been doing on the HEAL grant, but the city of Normandy Park would be unable to attend with us. And so we wanted to, in the effort of collaboration, make it as available to as many people as possible. And we have rescheduled that for March 15th. We'll be hosting that at Mount Rainier High School, so that's a yay for us. Sadly, Tony will not be able to attend that with us, but we will report back to him. So as of now, we are looking at March 15th for the rescheduled forum, I guess we're calling it, in a way to, when the 5 or 6 of us get together in the room, we have our own unique ideas on what collaboration means, but we kind of want to pick the brains of everyone and find out, what are some issues and goals and priorities, and how can we continue to move this coalition forward. So you'll be seeing some letters coming out and invitations and little traveling roadshow that will be coming to you on kind of what our goals are in an effort to get everyone on board.
Can I have one comment to that?
Sure.
I just wanted to make sure Melissa's comments are spot on, but the one thing that we absolutely wanted to do when we talk about working together collaboratively is we don't want to replace or duplicate. There are a lot of committees that are working together on a variety of issues already, and it's not our intent to cover any of those items. But there are other areas where, as anything from a simple idea might be, I wonder how they figured out how to make the Daffodil Parade a traveling parade or something like that, because it goes between cities. So there are things like that where you're just out of the box, just thinking about what could we do to help our region. So I just wanted to make sure that people understood we are not trying to replace anything that's already in place. We're just trying to augment it with an area where we can be creative and think of those ideas.
Okay. Dan?
Yeah. I just picked for the Senior Citizens Committee, and I can't understand why. Maybe I was the only gray hair around. And it's very interesting so far. Some stuff we've discussed so far has been emphasis on sidewalks and more walking trails through the cities, including the trails that are used by Highline schools. And there's also been some talk about trying to keep the schools open after hours. Now, I'm not deep into that yet so far, but several years ago we had several programs going through various schools where they had teaching after hours for people like us. And then more recently, you may have noticed and hearing some differences in the sounds there. So far the acoustics are very good, but I was trying out a device so I could hear over the din, because like many seniors, I have a hearing problem. And the best way to handle it is for somebody who's experienced with it to work with everybody else that can. Anyway, it's working pretty good so far. It's, I've had half the people tied up, but I've had excellent cooperation here. This is a fine organization to work with.
Good.
I shouldn't tell in front of them. But anyway, since I haven't had my first meeting yet, I guess I had better quit there.
Okay. A couple of things. First, I passed out the committee assignments to everybody, and the different shades of gray were actually color, and I should have thought to print it out in color. But if you read it across, it'll have who's on which committee. You'll notice that we are still lacking representatives for the Human Services Advisory Committee, the Left One Board, the Skate Board, South County Transportation Board, the Hotel Motel Tax Advisory Committee, and the Water Resource Inventory Resource Area 9. So if any of you have an interest in serving on any of those as the council's liaison, please let me know. Also, you'll see if there's a blank next to a name of somebody who has volunteered to be a liaison, we want to have an alternate. So in case somebody has a conflict and is not able to attend, you're able to contact fellow council member and have them be able to sit in for you. The second item is that we did get feedback on the ability to hear during the council meeting, and there's one thing in particular that we can do, aside from staff making some adjustments to the microphones and everything. Our tendency is to talk to one another, so we turn our heads, and sometimes we turn our heads away from the microphone. So I think we need to speak a little more clearly, a little more strongly, and directly into the microphone so that everybody is able to hear. That's the lowest tech solution to a lot of problems, and I think we need to make sure that we're doing that before we go to any expense at trying to solve something that might otherwise be resolved with simply just speaking more directly into the microphone.
Keep it simple.
There you go. So with that, administration reports.
Your Honor, I have three, one quickly by me and two by other folks. On Saturday at our retreat, the mayor has put on the agenda a discussion and prioritization of potential uses for one-time revenues. So staff has put together a list, pretty exhaustive list, and I want to thank Grant Fredericks for putting this together. And you'll see Grant's special touch when you take a look at this. It is very well organized. It is broken down into 4 different types of one-time revenues we could get: permits and fees from larger projects, sales and B&O taxes from larger projects, real estate excise tax from unusual sales of large pieces of property, and then compensation from rights-of-way when we vacate them. So the way we've put this together, it shows the type of source of funds for each type of items, what it is, how much it is, and a little explanation of any other issues with it. So I'm going to distribute this to you, and we'll use this as our basis for discussion on Saturday.
And this may not be an exhaustive list. There may be items that you think of or that you've heard of that may wind up that need to be added to the list as well.
And if you think of anything before close of work tomorrow, please give me a call. I've got this on my computer. I can add your item to it so we have a fresh, complete list on Saturday. And with that, I I'm finished with my report, and I'd like to turn to our planning agency so they can give their report to the city council.
Thank you for making some time for us tonight. My intent here is just to take a few minutes, a little outreach from the agency.
Would you let everybody know who you are first?
Yes, I will. My name's Shan Howell. I'm the current chair of the planning agency. And just wanted to give you a quick update on the status of the planning agency and some of the things that are currently moving forward through the agency. As you know, the agency is a citizen advisory board. Basically, our task is to review and comment on the city's comprehensive plan, as well as to make recommendations on zoning changes and rezones, and also to review subdivision plats. I, on behalf of the agency, would like to take just a moment and welcome the new members of the council, Councilmember Burridge and Councilmember Caldwell. Also, Mayor Kaplan, congratulations on your new appointment, as well as Mayor Pro Tem Pina. And former Mayor Scheckler, thank you for your service as mayor and your continued service on the council. Recently, the planning agency has experienced some challenges. Last year, we were going full bore. We were making some significant, had some significant momentum going forward. We were working on the downtown and Marina district design guidelines, to the point of needing to have approximately 2 meetings a month for, I think it was about a 3-month period or so. Following that, we ran into a perfect storm, if you will, of the situation, and we lost 5 members of the planning agency for a variety of reasons. One was a personal situation, and the member asked to be excused for that, which of course was granted. 2 members moved out of the city, so we lost them just because of that. One came up against a term limit, was not able to volunteer again. One completed a term and elected not to volunteer again. That left us with Cass Prindle and myself. It took some time to go through the recruiting process, and as such, we ended up with about a 5-month hiatus. Fortunately, the difficulty in stocking the agency got worked through, and recently we've filled all the agency positions. We now have Scott Evans, who represents us from the Zenith neighborhood, Christine Hall
Are any of
from
them here?
Woodmont.
Excuse me, are any of them here tonight?
Oh, I do see, I'm sorry, Shelley. Thank you, Shelley. William Hopp is from the Downtown Marina District. Shelley is from the Downtown Marina District, and I'm sorry, William is from South Des Moines. Mel McDonald is also from the Downtown and Marina District. Cass Prindle, who I mentioned earlier, is our vice chair. He is from Zenith, and myself, I am from the North Hill neighborhood. So in addition to the geographic representation that we have there, these members, including myself, are involved in some other different things that I just wanted to make mention of, just to show that these are folks that are truly committed to the community and to volunteering activities. Some examples include involvement on the Senior Services and Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, Highline Water District Advisory Committee, Professional Association Board Member, University of Washington Graduate Course and Graduate Certificate Advisory Board Member, Highline School District Occupational Skills Center Advisory Member, and also a member of the 33rd District, one of the political party committees. So I just wanted to bring that to light to show that these folks have their heart in all the right places when it comes to volunteering for the community. So why do I bring this all up? Well, I'm hoping that we can further our rapport with the council. We're a group of folks who get involved in this because we want to work with the council regarding the development that is taking place and going to take place in the city. In the past, at times, at least from my perspective, it's felt, being on the agency, a little bit like being an instrument of formality rather than a partner in progress. So it's my hope that as we go forward with this new group of agency members that we can work kind of through that. I think some of the reason that was the case is that, or that is part of the reason that we've had difficulty stocking the agency. But with a new agency, we have new opportunities. The spirit of this agency is truly to add value to our existence through greater inclusion in projects and cross-pollination of ideas, not just with City Council, but with also relative focus groups throughout the community. City planning staff recently has put forward a work program concept to us that I think is worth mentioning. And basically what this does is it has listed the activities that are coming down the pipeline to us. I think one of the challenges we've had in the past in feeling it's more of a formality is that we don't really get time, a lot of advance time to review what comes to us at our meeting. And so by looking at this timeline, it gives us time to, in general, just kind of get our thoughts around what we're going to be looking at, maybe educate ourselves a little bit better in advance to receiving them. Generally, our exposure to the meeting topics has only been a 3 or 4, 5 day, maybe a week, sometimes a little bit more longer of a period. City staff does a fantastic job of putting the information packets together. So it's not been an issue from a quality standpoint or anything like that. But I just think that we can be more effective as an agency, just being a little bit involved sooner on or seeing what's coming at us. But I think this also offers the council an opportunity, to maybe move some of your preliminary workload for your review processes over to the agency, bring us in a little bit closer with you folks, and let us help you earlier on in the processes rather than just being the stamp that says, okay, we recommend from the citizen level to go forward with what's been put in front of us. So that's essentially where we're at this point. In closing, again, I'd just like to say that we really appreciate the work that city staff does for the agency. I'd also like to add a personal comment on the council's recent at-large appointments, in this case to the Marina Beach Park Development Advisory Committee. I think that's a great approach. I think that it fosters the cross-pollination of ideas, from within the community. And so I believe that if you'll continue to see support from the agency members on those types of appointments going forward. And I hope that we have success with the Marina project that just got started. And I'd like to see more of those at-large appointments become available for folks to take advantage of and get involved with. That's what I have for you tonight, and I thank you for your time.
Very good. Are there any questions? All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, the University of Washington student presentation on a Marina District wayfinding program.
I have Denise make I don't know if it's a quick
I am
comment
going to
or-
do just a quick introduction as we were really fortunate. A friend of mine, Marty Curry, was teaching a class on community environment and planning at the University of Washington. So called me about whether or not we had a project for her class to work on. And so we had a broader scope for Marina District wayfinding program, and they were able to take a piece of that and bring forth a project recommendation for us. And so we had 4 students, Robert Franco Taylor, Brian Greer, Kimo Jordan, and Matan Reddick. And tonight, Robert and Matan will be giving a presentation, and Brian's here to help answer any questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the students, and I'll pass this down. It's one of their plans that they put together, and I will be making copies for each of you.
Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Robert. First and foremost, want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to share the work that we did. I guess just to get started, you are all obviously intimately familiar with the challenges and the assets in the Marina District. So our project sort of focused on improving both vehicular and pedestrian connectivity within the Marina District and from the Marina floor up to Marine View Drive. There was a larger wayfinding scope that Denise provided us that was a little too ambitious for us to address within 1 quarter's time. So we narrowed down the scope to this, which essentially was, like it's highlighted there, we wanted to enhance the city's unique character with our wayfinding program, as well as complement its existing assets. We wanted to reflect the city's nautical heritage as well. So the project summary, this is just a brief summary, this presentation, but in the report that Denise handed you, we've included some of the historical research that we used as a foundation for our recommendations. And initially we did an inventory of the pedestrian corridors, taking note of where pedestrian access was good and where it could use some improvement. We sort of devised a social ecology map which took note of the amenities provided to pedestrians, whether or not there was an attractive streetscape, whether or not there were say coffee shops or stores or actual activities for pedestrians to do. We then, based on that information, recommended sign placement, and we developed a directory map to go onto our kiosks that Matan will talk with you about in a couple minutes. And finally, we made some recommendations based on all the research and the work that we did. So first, this is an example of some of the pedestrian experience mapping that we did. The green that you see denotes an attractive pedestrian experience where there's sidewalk and the pedestrian path is very clearly defined. And the red indicates where a pedestrian path might not be as well defined, where there's either a lack of a sidewalk or a lack of a crosswalk, or the streetscape is a little more empty than it would be in the more developed areas of downtown. And we picked this central area because it's the most direct access point to the marina floor, which was another target of our project. So Baton's going to briefly talk with you about the wayfinding system that we actually came up with.
Thank you, Robert. And so essentially what we determined to be the key issue at hand was that people were arriving either in the marina as boaters who were mooring their boats, and they didn't know where to go. They saw just a blank wall in front of them of condominiums, or people up in the Marine View Drive area had no idea that there was a marina only a few blocks away. And so the key sort of theme that we used to approach this problem was legibility. The idea that a city should tell newcomers as well as regulars who might not know it that thoroughly, not only where to go, but how to get there, what there is to offer, how to get around, etc. Literally, as well as in a more figurative or indirect manner. And so the core product of our project ended up being the wayfinding system proper. And that had 3 overarching goals. One of them was to direct vehicles to the marina, which we won't address here, but it's addressed in the report, because we recognize that Des Moines is a vehicle-oriented city, and it will continue to be a vehicle-oriented city, whether or not the pedestrian experience improves. But beyond that, we also wanted to direct pedestrians to and from the marina, so to get that two-way flow, because as you saw in the previous slide, the connections there were severely limited, but also to promote the unique activities and heritage of the area, in the marina as well as on the main strip. And so with the issue of vehicles, the answer was simple. We just created vehicle signs, figured out where they would go. But for pedestrians, we decided, rather than having a series of signs pointing in a million different directions, it was more simple to condense information into pedestrian kiosks. And these would be small, they would be placed throughout the neighborhood, and they would include a directory of key activities, businesses, services, etc., with a map that would tell you where those were located, as well as information on the area, its history, its activities, and a calendar of events for that month. And so as far as the kiosks themselves, we did come up, we're not design students, but we did come up with a few concepts for how those could play out in the streetscape. And the gist of this is essentially that they could be arranged either as an opportunity for for street art, where they would have more presence and they would have more decorative surfaces that would be and give the possibility of enhancing the local character, or they could be compact and simply, be designed for visibility, but also be placed in a narrow area like a sidewalk, because we noticed that there weren't a lot of city rights of way along Marina View Drive that could accommodate very large signs. And just some examples, just so you can imagine what we're talking about. We have a waterfront map from somewhere, I think it's somewhere in Vermont. Sorry, I can't see the name and I actually don't recall. But it displays what activities are featured along the waterfront as well as the promenade that gets you to them. We have a walking map from London that highlights the key areas. So instead of looking at a huge map with labels all over it, your eye is immediately drawn to what the activities are, and it's cross-referenced with a directory at the bottom. And then a similar map in downtown Seattle that gives you walking times to different areas. And so our criteria for placement were, the idea was to intercept pedestrians at key locations. And so either a node of activity or a node of gathering. And so there is an existing kiosk on the marina floor, and that is located next to the harbor master's office. And so we decided that our information would be duplicated at the existing kiosk, but would also be located at the northern and southern entrances to intercept pedestrians who were entering the marina but didn't know what there was to do there. The 4 additional ones are located along Marina View Drive. In the north, they're located. One of them was located at Big Catch Plaza, seeing as that was the default public space in that area, and we placed the other ones next to bus stops to intercept people getting off the buses. That's sort of like an interim solution for lack of any particularly well-defined public space in that area. And so we did have the literal solution of literally enhancing legibility by literally telling people where to go, but we also developed a few recommendations to give people an idea of what's significant, where the center of town is, and actually encourage them to move through spaces by making them more welcoming and more meaningful. And so among those 3 recommendations, or sorry, 3 of those recommendations, one of them was, if you go down, if you look here, I believe it's 223rd, when you travel down it, it stops at an overlook that's completely hidden from view, where you have to jaywalk essentially to get to this overlook. And then you're directed down along Cliff Avenue to the north entrance of the marina. And there actually used to be a staircase going down there, I think, not 10 years ago? Very recently. I think more than 10 years ago, but quite recently. And now it's an abandoned bluff. And so we saw that as an opportunity to make a more welcoming and significant entrance to the marina, to an opportunity for art, and a more central location, having people enter really into the heart of the marina next to the harbor master's office, rather than entering at the ends and not knowing where to go. Another option was a central public node, public space in the center of town, at, for example, 7th and 223rd. But essentially, this would have the multiple function of making it easier to enter the marina. Obviously, we would retain disabled access at the north and south entrances, but make it easier to enter the marina and to actually visually indicate to people who are entering the marina as boaters that, wow, if I go up those stairs, there's probably something there. And I'm going to hand it back to Robert to summarize the rest of our recommendations. Thank you.
And another significant component of our project was the inclusion of art in the forthcoming development of the Des Moines, Des Moines downtown. And for that, we'd like to thank Councilmember Scott for her guidance and for the guidance of the rest of the Arts Commission. So essentially, our placement of art predicated on the current volume of pedestrian traffic and vehicular traffic, but as well as the projected pedestrian and vehicular traffic in the near future. One of the examples was a gateway arch, sort of denoting a vehicle's entrance into the downtown area. We envisioned it sort of at the southern end and at the northern end, where Kent Des Moines Road meets Marina View Drive, perhaps, and in the northern end at 216th. And another one of our final recommendations was the inclusion of some sort of traffic calming instrument, as well as sort of an instrument that would denote the center of town, either on Marine View Drive and 217th or on 7th and 217th. These two images are obviously of streets at a much larger scale, but we think the effect would still be valid at the intersection in question. So that essentially sums up the bulk of our project. If anyone has questions, we'd be happy to take some.
Okay. Any questions from council or comments? Melissa.
Just a comment that you, I think, hit the nail on the head, mirroring what we had talked about in our Economic Development Committee meetings last year, you know, finding the center of town and attracting pedestrians and events. And so Tony and I were looking at each other and nodding, and so I just want to thank you. I think great job. It's really well represents many conversations that we've had as council members, so thank you.
Matt and then Carmen.
It's funny, all the people from that committee are saying, yeah, I want to make a comment. This is great. I think it's, I like the fact that it does kind of create that marker that we, in the center of town. I like the kiosk idea around town. I was commenting when you guys brought it up that you need to let people know where to go, and I was thinking you must not be involved in politics, because I think we're told where to go and how to get there quite often. So anyway, I think this is a series of great ideas, and we can definitely incorporate them in a lot of our discussions.
Carmen?
I was picking up your page 16 where you talk about December in Des Moines. Isn't it on? Yeah, it's on.
Can't hear you.
It's going on and off. I think too much of the passengers through this area, people who might stop by here, only think they're neat things to see and do in the summer. And we have such a mild maritime climate that your concept of perhaps each month having a what's happening that month. I was noticing yesterday, in fact, I took a picture of the Olympics. They were just gleaming and the sky was blue. And the night before that, we had a fantastic sunset. And 2 days before that, we had a big sailboat race. And a week before that, we had bird watching events going on. And there's so much that we can promote that is neat, that isn't dependent upon the summertime. So I like your page 16. It just was reminding me of what we need to do to market ourselves.
Any other comments or questions? Bob?
Yeah, in a way, and I think for some of us up here, you might recall this, there's some deja vu here. Tony's, yeah, he knows what I'm talking about. This is the second time we've had University of Washington students here in the city to do an analysis similar to this. We had a more extensive one done some years ago that actually looked at the buildings and what have you, worked off of what could be a theme for the city and all of that. Did a magnificent job. But one of the elements of that group, too, was to informational things, making it more pedestrian friendly, and signage, getting people to know where to go to and what's here and what's there. Unfortunately, because of budgetary restraints, a lot of that stuff didn't occur. But it's nice to see that we still have more information coming to us to reinforce what we already have seen. And maybe this is the time to start looking more seriously at getting some of these ideas implemented.
Yeah, we actually used that report to sort of inform
previous
a lot
report?
of the work that we did.
Okay, so you know what
The
report I'm
architecture
talking about.
Storefront.
Yeah,
Storefront?
we sort of tried to design a project that might be more immediately implementable. Sort of a lot of the recommendations in that one were obviously a lot more ambitious regarding the
Oh, yeah.
overall makeover of the
They took over
town.
the city.
Right, right. Yeah, but they did excellent work.
They did, outstanding. And those ideas are still being tossed around in certain committees around here. Someday.
Any other comments? Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
The clerk will please read the consent agenda.
Your Honor, before we move on, it says executive session will be next. However, we do not have need of one, so go right to consent calendar.
Thank you, Mayor. The first item is the approval of vouchers. The motion is to approve for payment those vouchers and payroll transfers included in the above list and further described as below. Claim checks are $1,940,492.66. Payroll fund transfers are in the total amount of $841,575.12. Total certified wire transfers, voids, AP, and payroll vouchers are $2,782,067.78. Item number 2 is the Transportation Gateway Project, South 24th Avenue, South Right-of-Way acquisition. The Ferry property, tax parcel number 0922049320, project parcel number 54. Tax parcel 0922049135, project parcel number 56. And tax parcel number 0922049126, project parcel number 57. The motion is to approve purchase of land from 3 parcels owned by Robert Ferry as follows: 248 square feet of land for $1,530.16, temporary slope easement of mutual benefit with an area of 1,960 square feet, and improvements at $600 for a total of $2,130 for parcel number 54. 207 square feet of land for $1,277.19 and improvements at $300 for a total of $1,577 for parcel number 56. 300 square feet of land for $1,851, a permanent 700 square foot slope easement for $1,079.75, and improvements at $300 for a total of $3,231 for parcel number 57 as just compensation. An administrative settlement for all 3 parcels in the amount of $3,062, and payment for the statutory evaluation allowance of $750 per parcel, which is $2,250 for all 3 parcels, for a grand total, if you're not confused yet, of $12,250 rounded to the nearest dollar, plus any closing costs, and further to authorize the city manager to sign the statutory warranty deeds, permanent and temporary slope easements, construction easements, rights of entry, and real property vouchers substantially in the forms as submitted, and accept the rights of way on behalf of the City of Des Moines. Item number 3 is the reappointment of Susan Corey to a full term on the Human Services Advisory Committee. The motion is to confirm the mayoral appointment of Susan Corey to the Human Services Advisory Committee, effective January 1st, 2012, to a 2-year term which expires on December 31st, 2013. And that, Your Honor, concludes the consent agenda.
Very good. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Do you want anybody to pull anything first?
No, I'm having the motion first, and then we'll... Okay, so Melissa, and who seconded?
Second.
Dan. Okay. Does anyone wish to pull an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Passes.
Can't cut it in half, huh?
What's that?
You can't cut it in half.
Okay. Next item, old business, Department of Natural Resources lease for the Marina.
Mayor, council members, good evening. Joe Dusenberry, Des Moines Marina Harbor Master. As you remember, on the meeting of December 1st, it was the first time we talked about this issue. At that time, we talked about the history and the evolution of the lease. We also talked a little bit about the proposed lease and some of the differences being mainly the increase in the rate, the change in the term from 25 years to 30 years, from 30 years to 25 years, excuse me, and the addition of an escalator clause. Of course, as the lease before you, you can see is much larger volume-wise than the lease that we had before, but most of that is the standard liability and environmental clauses. At that time, there was a question from the council regarding the easternmost boundary of this lease area B, and also the extent, the furthest western extent of the old 222nd right-of-way. And at that time, the council asked the staff to go back and research that, and we did, and we went back to the work done for the vacations of the right-of-way recently within the last couple of years, and we did find that it was the furthermost, the westernmost boundary of the right-of-way is the mean low tide line as shown on our map. Excuse me. So we're satisfied that that is the correct survey. And at that, I'll answer any other questions you might have.
Actually, Bob and then Matt.
I think I've studied this one pretty well, so I've got a pretty good idea of what this is where it's going to lead us. So in order to get the discussion going, I'll go ahead and move to approve the draft lease agreement with the State of Washington Department of Natural Resources for the lease of 3 parcels of aquatic lands as shown in Exhibit A of the draft lease, authorizing the payment of $101,302.34 per year for the use of the leased lands, and further to authorize the city manager to sign the agreement substantially in the form as attached.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. Motion by Councilmember Scheckler, seconded by Councilmember Pina. I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you. It's going to take me a while to adjust too, so. And I'm a little younger than you are. Councilmember Pina.
I have a few questions. So, do we receive any service for the expense that we're putting out, or is it just sand underwater?
It's a strict land lease. In other words, we have the use of the land for the rental paid.
And in this case, the land is all underwater.
Okay.
Well, with the exception of the area, the northwest corner of the parking lot.
That's true.
Okay. And what would be the impact of not having this lease?
We would, the state, if you read the lease, the state at their election could ask us to remove the rock breakwater and return it to its original state.
That's a whole run of the marina?
Yes.
Okay. So the other thing was, as I was reading through the document, there is a rent cap clause on page 64, 4.5, Article C, and I'd like to know if this could possibly apply. It notes there's a rent cap. State shall increase rent incrementally in compliance with the noted RCW. It says if application of the statutory rent formula water-dependent uses would result in an increase in the rent attributable to such uses of more than 50% in any 1 year, states shall limit the actual increase implemented in such a year to 50% of the then existing rent. In subsequent successive years, states shall increase the rental amount incrementally until the state implements the full amount of the increase as determined by the statutory rent formula. Is there any opportunity for us there?
In the event that clause applies to the rent escalation clause. In other words, every 4 years now, the state will come back. They'll take a look at the upland assessment. They'll grind through the formula, and they'll see if there's a rental increase. This is very similar to what we do with our leases. We always put an escalation clause in there. If that escalation fits those requirements, if it pops up more than 50%, then they'll stair step it over the length of that reevaluation period. In our case, that's 4 years.
And I think the other half of it is what that is referring to is the rent escalations that occur within the term of the lease itself. The fact that we're going up such a great amount has to do with the fact that our lease expired in 2002. We are essentially on a, well, I call it month to month, but Joe called it a year to year. The original term of the lease with the state has gone by, so this particular clause does not apply to the fact that we are getting a rent increase that's, I don't know how many, by 1,000% more than what we're paying right now.
Yeah, so I guess if I could.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I guess the last thing I'd like to ask Joe is, so what, okay, if we don't do this, they could ask us to take down the breakwater. They pretty much destroy the marina.
Well, I think the first thing they would do is probably drag us into court and try to make us pay that way.
That'd destroy other things.
Yeah.
So I guess, so, and I asked the city manager at the same time, so, an attorney. The reason I seconded this is because I think at this time we have limited option. But looking forward, what are the reasonable options that we as a council could pursue?
Would you like?
Well, in general, there are two.
Well, actually, if you don't mind, it kind of leads into a question I had for you, if you don't mind if I
Add on.
in there.
That's my last one.
Go ahead.
Let's make it a comment.
Now that it appears that we are,
Before you ask it, though,
Sure.
just so you know, it's Bob, Dan, and Carmen.
okay. So now that it appears that we're going to save our beloved breakwater, is there any impediment that we would face if we were to try to gain pedestrian access to that breakwater, the breakwater, and say maybe have something that pedestrians could walk on it, railings and boards and what have you, and actually create an asset for the city that could actually make money for us?
There's a pretty significant hurdle to get across here, and go back down to this end of the map. We really don't have any access right now to the south end of the breakwater. This is essentially the yacht club right here. The marina, this is the yacht club over in this area. The marina the city owns 20 feet around the perimeter here, and then this is the Anthony's parcel. So essentially the city property ends right at the top of the ramp. So to get to this other side over here, we're going to have to negotiate an agreement either with the yacht club to cross their property, or possibly there's also an easement for the underground or for the underwater power lines that go from that substation off Marine View Drive that go out and go around that way. So there are some opportunities. The other opportunity is, the goal is to get it from non-water dependent to water dependent because the rate is so much lower. For instance, a good example of that is the Elliott Bay Marina up in Magnolia at the foot of the Magnolia Bluffs. That was probably the last rock breakwater built in the state of Washington, and they set that up so they essentially have a little dock with a boat, and you can push a button and a staff member will come out and will ferry you across to the jetty, and they have a large public space over there where you can sit and watch the sunset, have a sandwich, whatever you want to do, and then they'll come back and they'll ferry you back and forth.
That's cool.
They had the same problem. Not exactly that problem, but they had they have a very long rock breakwater that covers up a lot of ground, so they had a very large lease area. So
all right, so there's potential for us to make that into a income-producing asset.
Well, I doubt if it'll ever be an income-producing asset, but we could get the lease rate down significantly if we could get some kind of public access out there. There are other issues involved with that, but jetty walks are very, very common all over the country, and so and they're very popular wherever they are. They do have some liability issues, they have some management issues, but that probably represents the best solution going forward, is to figure out some way to do that.
From a constructability standpoint, the breakwater is very stable.
Oh, yeah.
So putting in some pilings, a nice walkway, appropriate railings and the like, is, from a building standpoint, is not going to be that difficult. We haven't even really costed it out. My personal preference would be to approach the yacht club and see if there's some sort of an agreement that we
I
can
agree
work
with you there, Tony. So how would it, if we were able to accomplish this, what actually would it cost us at that point if we were to create an entity like that?
Cost us for access or cost us to actually build the jetty?
No, I was referring to the lease.
It would be significantly less. I mean, with
possibly all the way down to zero, but
that's what I'm getting at.
See, for lease area C, we essentially pay nothing.
So we have an incentive to
Right.
to proceed.
I doubt if you'll get all the way to zero for lease area A, but there's a big, big difference between the lease rate for water-dependent uses and non-water dependent uses. So if you could just.
All right.
Dan, Carmen, and Jeanette.
Okay. From the standpoint of the figure that's been even asked for, the original Constitution the original lease kind of allows for it. But the original lease is for a 2.1 is to authorize a marina. Says no more details. Now, I haven't got an argument against paying the amount they want to raise the base, because the lease does allow for the rates to be raised. But the state has done nothing with this marina. The city has had the full burden of the marina. And running the marina, we just got through spending quite a bundle on it. I feel if we accept the changes that come out in this and just don't hold it to the marina, we would be in violation of the state constitution, which is a gift of public property.
Public fund.
For no purpose. We're giving the state public property. And we're given, this is paid for by the taxpayers in Des Moines. Now, like I say, the argument, I have no argument against the fee because it's pretty well written out that they can raise the rates. And that's hurtful. But all this, if we invested in it, if your people there and everybody else, the taxpayers and everybody else, have paid for all these improvements, and the state can come in with a bulldozer and bulldoze the whole thing flat, dump it in the bay, and then say, come on, city, pick this up, you dumped it. With this possibility. So we are in violation of the state constitution, I feel. Gift of public properties.
I would refer that to the city attorney.
I've been watching Pat's expression here.
We should also perhaps go to Olympia and ask the laws to be changed to give that property to the city. It belongs to the city. It's half of Des Moines. And I'd like to fight you on something else.
Councilmember Caldwell, I believe there's consideration for the contract, and that avoids the constitutional issues with regards to gift of public funds. It is a land lease, and we are getting lease. I think we'd have better luck approaching the legislature with regards to gifting this. And you know, I don't know what the reaction would be, but I know at one point they talked to us about giving us Saltwater State Park because they no longer wanted to maintain it. So it may not be out of the realm of possibilities. But I think that approach would be a more appropriate approach.
Okay, Carmen and then Jeanette.
I guess this is more of a comment. In reading through this lease, I haven't seen anything weighted this heavily in favor of the landlord or the lessor since the Landlord-Tenant Act went through. I mean, this gives them every right in the world to punish us if we make mistakes. It gives us no rights if they make mistakes. It just doesn't seem to me as though that Landlord-Tenant Act must apply to them. If it does apply to them, they're certainly ignoring it in the way that they've written this lease.
Again, I think I'll refer to the city attorney.
think I can answer that one.
Okay.
Tim George with the City Attorney's Office. The Landlord-Tenant Act does not apply to this. And this is basically a lease that was clearly written by the Department of Natural Resources. It does contain a lot of standard environmental and liability clauses that are required by the state. But we have discussed all of these with the harbor master. He felt confident that we could meet all of these conditions, and that we currently are meeting these conditions. So.
It just seemed to me that we also should have language in there that gives us the right to certain remedies if the state has done anything in error. It shouldn't all be one-sided.
Well, because I guess this is a lease of land, we have the right to go over this, or to use the land. So if they were to construct something, we could ultimately proceed with a breach of contract action. But there's really not a whole lot that they could potentially do to violate this agreement.
Thank you.
Jeanette and then Matt.
I'm wondering if we wanted to pursue the option of talking with legislators and trying to get a bill to have them give us the land or give us a different type of lease, if we should postpone signing this lease, or if we should try to make it for 1 year, or should we, would this bind us, even if we went to the legislature, should we keep our options open?
I think going to the legislature, a bill can be written in any way that could supersede what we put into this lease. But going to the legislature right now, at this time, in this economy, and asking them to adopt a bill that either treats Des Moines different or treats all public entities that are leasing aquatic lands different, with the budget problems they have, is very unlikely to result in any sympathy whatsoever at the state. As a matter of fact, they're looking to take some of our revenues that we've been getting for 70 years.
Yeah.
The liquor revenues that we've been getting for years and years are at risk in the legislature right now.
Well, that's why I'm concerned that they would, if we agree to pay $100,000 a year, they'll be looking at it like they're losing that much. But we've only been paying $7,000 a year, so it doesn't seem like that much.
Well, and I think you can also rest assured that DNR has been told to get out there and renew every single lease that they've got as quickly as they possibly can, get those revenues bumped up, because that's all general fund revenue for them. That helps fill the hole. Now, that's not to say that we can't go down to Olympia and see what we can do. We can write a bill that does just about anything, including saying that, let's say we get the fees reduced to $1 a year and have it apply to any existing leases that are in effect at that time. The other reason why going for 1 year I don't believe is a good idea right now is, and this discussion occurred before you were on the council, and that is we would really like to completely redo and expand the fishing pier. Of course, we can't do that with the revenues that we have, but there are grants available to do that. In order to be qualified for one of those grants, we really have to have control of the asset that we want to increase or to improve. And generally, they're looking for 20 or 25-year commitments on the parts of the grantees. So if we only had a 1-year lease, we wouldn't even be considered for any of those grants. So for those two reasons, I would suggest, if everything else is okay in this lease, authorize me to sign it. But if you want me to go to Olympia and with a bill to see if we can get our lease amount reduced, we've even talked about possibly purchasing Area B. And we contacted DNR just a few days ago, and they are open to a discussion about that. Purchasing that opens up a whole bunch of good issues for us. So I will take whatever direction council wants to go.
Matt?
Well, I didn't have, it wasn't until you spoke, Tony, that I got the questions about what options we had answered, and I appreciate you going into that. I think the thing that I got out of your statement and Joe's statement is, though, are that this is bigger than Des Moines. We're not the only one that's in this game. So right. If we go down, I mean, we can talk to our local representatives and we can go down to Olympia and we can lobby, but the impact of the state's going to be much greater than just Des Moines, because they have to come up with something for everybody, which, again, I agree with you, in this economy and with this.
There are, I don't know how many,
issues.
I don't know how many public marinas there are out there that have DNR leases, but it's many. And then there's all the private leases as well. And I do believe the state is trying to treat everyone the same. So the same formula applies whether you're public or private. And the real reason for that is, if you think about it, running a marina is not a core city responsibility. It is an enterprise that we elected to do as a city in the late 60s, early 70s as part of an economic development strategy, in my opinion. But it's not a core function of the city, so they are trying to keep us equal to the private sector.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just, so I guess the only other thing I'm looking at is that, okay, the lease is $100,000 and it's per year. The proposal that Councilmember Scheckler put on the table, if we've got public access to at least a parcel of this, we could reduce that, and that, by reducing that we would have to pay anyway, that almost gives us seed money and incentive to do it.
Yes.
Along with the fact that there may be motivation to allow us to acquire. If we get into, the one question I have is, if we get into a lease of a longer duration, the purchase, I assume, would terminate that lease, and we would not be held to those future obligations.
And when I talked about purchase, I was focusing mostly on Area B. Area A, I think, would be way too costly. We could certainly put the numbers together, but a very rough guess as to what the value of lease B would be, in my opinion, it starts around $200,000 and goes up from there.
So would we potentially be able to work with Councilmember Scheckler's idea to kind of, in Area A?
I think Councilmember Scheckler's idea of putting a public access of some sort on Area A is really where we should concentrate our efforts, because that is actually doable, in my opinion. And if you can, let's say you reduce your lease cost by $85,000, $90,000, and we have this amount built, the $100,000 built into the budget right now, that's money that could be used, for example, for debt service.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Bob and then Melissa.
Okay. Well, I was just going to kind of summarize, and I think you kind of helped me in that, Matt. Because hell has no intention of freezing over anytime soon, it's doubtful that we're going to get anything through the legislature in a reasonable amount of time, and certainly we're not going to get it through this session. That's not to say that we're not going to have 3 people that represent the 33rd District on our side. I'm sure we will, because they all have an interest in this city and they all love that marina. But getting it through the state legislature, I think, is going to be a real uphill battle, and it'll probably take many sessions before we can get there. I think in the interim, though, the public access portion can be obtained in a relatively short period of time if we really get diligent at it. And that can offset a lot of the expense. But not only that, it also could give us another attraction, a marina attraction that we currently don't have. So there's a big plus there, too. So there could be a little bit of a silver lining here for us. It might be forcing us to do something that actually, in reality, will turn out to be another marina asset. So, in summary, I think that's the way it should be pursued. I'm not writing off anybody by saying we should go to our legislature. Not at all. I think we should go ahead and attempt that. Just don't hold our breath for that happening anytime too soon. Okay.
Melissa?
I was going to say, as both a member of the Municipal Facilities Committee and the liaison to the Marina Business Plan Advisory, I think we should take the Breakwater Walkway plan and maybe move it into committee, and we can work together with Joe and staff and see what type of timeline it would take, what type of costs there would be, and what the delta would be and what the break even would be.
As a matter of fact, I'll make that motion if you'd like to remand it to Municipal Facilities.
Second.
Remand.
This issue of the breakwater development
walkway
to Municipal Facilities.
Well, we have a motion in front of us for the lease.
You know, if they want to accept it as a friendly amendment, we can add it to it.
Okay, yeah, okay. Is there any more discussion? We'll take them separately.
Okay, fine.
Is there any more discussion on the lease? Dan?
Yeah, I was thinking on the legislature bit, I'd personally go to the legislature and talk to our own people down there, because this, again, it's a political dynamite, but we have schools to worry about, but we also have our own revenue to worry about. And I think our legislators might be receptive to making a change.
Okay. Any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, passes 6-1. Nothing needs to be read in on that, correct? Okay, is there, and then Councilmember Scheckler had a motion to refer the Marina breakwater issue to the Municipal Facilities Committee, and I believe it was seconded by Councilmember Musser.
Sure.
Sure.
Well, did I pick up on, or was that, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Pina?
I'll second that.
Any discussion on that?
And what was the motion again?
The motion is to refer the exploring the building of
A breakwater
access,
walkway.
the breakwater from the marina to the Municipal Facilities Committee, which you sit on. Okay?
Discussion?
Carmen?
This is sort of semi-tied to it. That's the committee that is behind the stakeholders group. And I was talking the other day with Tony and wondering out loud, would it be wise to have a representative of the yacht club on the stakeholders group if we're going to be trying to talk about things that could involve their end of the marina too?
We're not talking about the stakeholders group, we're talking about.
No, we aren't, but we're talking about the committee that said they were going to create the stakeholders group, and we set up the rules for how it would be composed.
Can I speak to that? No.
I'm suggesting an amendment that would add one more member to the stakeholders committee that is.
I think we should take that separately.
Yeah, that has to be.
Okay, so, is there any discussion on referring to committee? Breakwater discussion? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Now, Carmen, you were recommending adding someone to the stakeholder group?
I was recommending, if we're going to be talking about the full length of the breakwater, if it might be valuable to have a representative from the yacht club be an added member to the stakeholders committee.
Melissa?
I was remanding the breakwater to municipal facilities, not to the Business Plan Advisory Committee, only because Heber Kennedy and I think that we should stick with the recommendation we paid for, basically. We had a professional consultant come in, make a recommendation based on his experience. He's worked with Joe, he worked with us. I think that if he felt having a yacht club member as part of that committee would be worthwhile, it would have been included. But I think I think the Municipal Facilities Committee needs to really research the breakwater before it goes out to that committee.
Okay.
So that was what my thought was when I said, as the Municipal Facilities Committee, let's work with Joe and the Marina staff on that. That was what my thought was.
Jeanette?
Have we voted on that? Have we voted on that motion yet to take it to committee?
Yes.
Okay. So now I'm wondering on the taking the issue to the legislature, do we need to set up a committee for that or direct staff or?
Actually on,
Yeah, the last item on the agenda tonight is intergovernmental policies and positions. That would be the time to put an issue like that in front of the council for approval.
suggest a policy asking the state to either gift or, however you would want to couch it, whether it's to gift the land or to change the.
The rental formula.
Right.
I just have a procedural question.
Yes.
Dan, when you said aye to the main motion, were you agreeing to it, or were you just?
No, he voted no.
He voted no, okay.
It passed 6-1.
And Councilmember Scott, I believe, made a motion to add an additional person to the,
I don't think anyone seconded it.
I was going to make that point.
Right.
Okay.
So, very good. Next item is Cleanscape Solid Waste Contract Amendment. Actually, would council like to take their break first before we get into the next agenda item, or do you want to push on through?
How confident, strong.
Any,
Break soon if it won't take very long.
she's new.
The length of the item is often
Yeah,
dependent
okay,
on the council.
let me help them out a little bit. Can we take 5 then?
Let's
Would
take
that be-
5.
yeah,
All right,
let's
we'll take a 5-minute break.
take- 8 years told me no.
Okay, back from our break. Cleanscape Solid Waste Contract.
Land use planner Laura Tachico provide a short introduction, and then our friends from Cleanscapes will make the bulk of the presentation.
Good evening. My name is Laura Tachico. I'm a land use planner and the solid waste and recycling coordinator for the city. About 2 months ago on November 1st, we began solid waste collection under the new contract we have with Cleanscapes. And as they've been reaching out and talking with customers, as they've been confirming what the accounts are, there have been a lot of requests from customers, both commercial and residential, for not only additional services, but additional frequency of services. So as appropriate, we have compiled those requests into a contract amendment, and that's what we're bringing forward tonight. Should that be approved, the potentially affected ratepayers would be notified 45 days before those rates would go into effect. And just to be clear, these are additional line items in the existing rate schedule. There's no proposed changes to the rate schedule that was approved as part of the contract. These are just merely additional services and frequencies to be added. And I have Cleanscape staff here, and they're going to walk through what those proposed changes are.
Good evening. My name is Danielle DeClerc, and I'm with Cleanscapes. And please stop me at any time if there's information you don't want to have, or a lot of the information is in your packets, or if there is additional information you'd like to have. So the new services that we're requesting rates for are for every other week recycle only service. Currently, customers cannot get recycle service without having garbage service as part of the contract. An additional rate is the increased commercial food waste and yard waste collection frequencies. So commercial customers can currently get one 96-gallon yard waste cart collected weekly. There have been a couple of requests for more frequent collection. The same is true for increased commercial compactor collection. There is a rate in the contract for a one-time-a-week compactor collection, different sizes, but no multiple frequencies. The 15-yard drop box service is not included in the current contract. It jumps from 10 to 20. That's a big jump for customers who may only have a little bit of additional need. And then the last one is on-call services. If a customer has an event and they need to have a dumpster picked up on an on-call basis, they already have service, but they just need a one-time extra collection to just help them out, then that's an on-call service. We don't have a rate for that either. And then for existing services, we do extras collection for both yard waste and garbage. There's a garbage extras rate. There's currently no yard waste extras rate, although we do provide the service now. And there's also a drop box dry run service that that is sort of an accidental service when we go to collect a drop box, which is also called a roll-off box. If the customer does not make that box available for collection, we've gone to that site, there's no way to charge them for not having had access to that site, even though we've tried to provide that service, despite all the efforts that we make to contact them. So the actual calculations, what you see here is the every other week residential recycle service only rate. That rate is comprised of the collection component only. It's identical to the garbage collection rate, except that it's every other week, so it's only half. So it's half of the collection component only of what the garbage rate is with no disposal fee. The increased frequency on the commercial and yard waste food waste service, that top line right there, the 96-gallon service, 1 pickup a week, has already been approved. It's just the 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week services. It's literally take the once a week, multiply it by 2 times a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week. It's a straight line calculation. The same is true for the compactor. We have a 1 pickup a week rate that has been approved. The 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week are literally just that 1 time, times 2, times 3, times 4. Also sort of a straight line calculation. We didn't put in on the PowerPoint, but it is in your packet, that there are 1.5 cubic yard, 2 cubic yard, 4 cubic yard, 6 cubic yard, and 8 cubic yard services where we'd like to do the exact same math, make sure that that's part of the rate schedule as well. The 15 cubic yard drop box calculation is the one that's in the middle. It's exactly between the 10 yard and the 20 yard, so it's also a just divide the difference and add it to the 10 cubic yards straight. On-call services, this is calculated, or the way we would like to calculate it for the additional rates, is the same as the monthly rate divided by weeks, because you're going to do it once. Monthly is for 4 times during the month. So it's the monthly rate divided by 4.33, on average 4.33 weeks per month, and then a 20% setup fee, because an on-call service is basically taking the driver off his route to go and do a one-time pickup and then putting him back onto his route. It requires more customer service, tiny little bit more fuel, tiny little bit more driver time. So that's what that 20% setup fee would be for. And the same calculation then again for all the other commercial garbage and recycle services so that we can provide that on-call service to them. And I think the last 2 are really just the drop box dry run, and that is what we'd like to do if we do go to a site to collect a roll-off box and the roll-off box is just not available for collection at that point. The first thing we do, obviously, is try to call the customer. We're there. We want to try to pick it up. They've asked us to come and collect it to try to get access. If we really can't get access, the driver has just made that trip. And rather than bill the customer for the time and the effort that it took to get there on an hourly basis, we've come up with what we believe is a far more fair sort of one-way trip charge. That would be significantly less than what it would normally be if we did the, just the straight up math of driver time and truck time times that hourly rate. And the last one, which leads to a savings for the customer as well, is garbage extras. If a customer has additional garbage beyond their service level, are charged at $4.61 for each 32-gallon equivalent, which is a garbage bag. If somebody has yard waste extras, we don't need to pay the same disposal fee to King County for that material. And so we can save the customer significant amounts of money by dropping, again, that disposal charge to what it actually costs for yard waste and not for garbage. So garbage is significantly more than yard waste disposal. So those are the rate additions that we would like to get added to the amendment or the amended contract. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions by council? Bob?
Again, I'll just jump in. I'll move to authorize the city manager to sign the January 13, 2012 contract addendum to the May 13, 2011 Comprehensive Garbage Recycling and Compostable Collection Agreement between the City of Des Moines and Cleanscapes Incorporated.
Second?
Motion made by Councilmember Scheckler, seconded by Councilmember Musser. Dan?
Yeah. The contract I saw was signed May 31st. I was kind of surprised because I wasn't on the board at that time, so I missed out on all this. But my first knowledge of this came with the truck started driving by and picking up our garbage cans.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be the attitude throughout the area. That the first they knew of it was the first they knew of this was at the first of the year, or just at the tail end of December. And myself, I'd prefer to hold a change like this give it time to season itself, or at least maybe separate the homeowner from the commercial. Because the commercial is in and out situations. The homeowner is surprised, and they're still like us, figuring out what your actual rates are per can.
So we did do what we believe or hope was a fair amount of communication. It is always hard to reach everybody, and somehow we must have missed, getting to you with postcards or information in the mail or on your new cards or even in the newspaper. So somehow we missed paths. We were living parallel lives at that point, somehow or another. And I really apologize that we weren't able to get in touch with you somehow or another. And if there's anything we can do now, we'd be happy to come out and talk to your community or come to the community center or talk to a homeowners association to help explain the rates and explain what we have.
And what I come at, many commercial areas, it's not looked good for both parties if right after you install something, the rates go up or vary. And that's why I suggested maybe holding it off for 6 months or maybe a year before you come back to change the rate. Get people used to the system. Because the old system, of course, they've laid off the drivers and everything else, I suppose. I don't know what happened to drivers. But,
And I'd like to chime in just a little bit on this one.
but that's my question.
For history's sake, we put an RFP out early in 2011 because it had been forever since we had done any kind of competitive process for garbage collection services, and that was the direction of council. But we were under a tight time frame because the contract we had with Allied Waste would not allow us to go beyond October 31st of 2011. We got lightning speed for government, a contract done with Cleanscapes in May, and they geared up, and I think they did a pretty good job with the public information part, but no one's perfect, and they may have missed a few people. And unfortunately, when their first bills went out, and I will admit, I did the same thing. I took a look at it, and I said, well, wait a minute. This is more money than I'm paying Allied. What is going on? And then I looked at the bill again, and I realized that it is a bill for 3 months' worth of service, not 2 months' worth of service. And when you take that into consideration, all the rates, except one or two here and there, all the rates went down for what, in my opinion, was a higher level of service. But we did tell our friends at Cleanscapes that if I had a hard time understanding the bill at first glance, imagine people who weren't part of the process to bring them on. So they're now doing a little scrambling to figure out how to make their bills easier to understand. And as we talk people through it and we tell them it's a 3-month, not a 2-month bill, they go, oh, yeah, you're right. So rest assured the rates didn't go up. And then finally, everything that we have here in front of you tonight, for the most part, are for things that customers are asking them to provide, but they can't provide it right now because we haven't authorized that service or that fee.
Right.
So these are things that your constituents are asking for, but they cannot provide it. So that's why it's in front of you this evening.
Matt?
Tony, you did me a favor of making most of the points that I was going to make. So I'm the only other thing that I think I want to add on to is in a couple of the community forums that I have been part of, the topic of the fee came up, and then there were the eye-opening moments where a few people in the audience actually recognized that it was for 3 months, not 2 months, and so forth. And the discussion that Cleanscapes is picking up batteries and compact fluorescents and things like that. We do have to put them in a bag on top the recycle bins, but you are taking them, and people, and several of the people in the room acknowledged getting the paper materials that explain that you did pick those things up. Well, I don't think they threw them away. I think they just missed that part. So, well, whatever. They must have recycled it. That's it. But anyway, I think it's important that as a body we note that this is not really a fee increase, and based on your math, there's no incremental jumps or anything. This is an addition of service that is being requested by the citizens of this community and the businesses in this community, and I think we need to act on this.
Any other comments?
Yeah, and actually I'll kind of jump in on their defense too. It amazed me in the beginning how quickly you responded to the contract dilemma we were in as a city and the service that you provided. I think the committee that handled it at the time, was it Environment or was it Municipal Facilities? What committee actually reviewed all of this?
It was the franchise, ad hoc franchise.
The ad hoc franchise committee did a dynamite job doing their homework too. And now that the little glitches are over with regarding the 3-month billing cycle and the 2-month, it did confuse some of my neighbors too, and I had to explain it to them. I'm hearing a lot of compliments, which is good coming from garbage collectors, because I don't normally hear that. So in your defense, I think that this is a response to better customer service from people that you're hearing from within our community that would like additional service, but it was not in the original agreement with you. Now, hopefully it will be. So.
And one last thing, the cool thing these folks are providing is tracking information for each of their vehicles. They have GPS tracking and they have video. The second, I've only received 2 complaints so far, and I've resolved them both. But the second complaint was someone saying the recycling wasn't picked up at my place and several other places along my street. And a little static with a phone call to Cleanscapes. But when they took a look at it, they looked at the records of that vehicle, and you know what? The customer was right.
Right.
He was missed. So they were able to contact him and saying, you're right, we missed you. Now we see what the problem is. They worked with their driver. They got it corrected. And in the future, when we get a phone call from someone saying we got missed, we'll be able to show them the video as to whether or not they were right. And that eliminates that argument as to whether or not the carts got put out at the right time.
I would also encourage all of you, if you have constituents that you know would need a little bit or could use a little bit more information from us, we do site visits. We are out here in the community a lot talking to multifamily complexes, and we're more than happy to come out and meet them one-on-one and have a conversation with them, whether it's our field crew, our route managers, or our waste diversion staff. We're happy to do that. So thank you.
Personally, I live in a condominium, and the service is better. I think the only glitch in the entire thing, I think, was there wasn't adequate communication about the fact that it was going to be a 3-month billing cycle instead of a 2-month billing cycle. But with that exception, it's night and day compared to the service we were getting before. I had more complaints about our prior provider. I've been on the council 10 years. In the last 3 years prior to us going out for an RP, I heard more complaints about garbage pickup and recycling pickup, both from commercial and from residential. I've heard nothing but positive things, with the exception of the confusion over the billing. So keep up the good work.
Thank you.
With that, is there any other comments? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, last item on the agenda tonight, intergovernmental policies and positions.
Thank you, Your Honor. Attachment 1 to the agenda item is the current set of policies and positions for the city, adopted in January of 2011. Our typical process is to simply walk through these section by section and ask council members if there's anything they would like to add, delete, or modify. And I'm going to jump in right away. Councilmember Burridge, in the issue that she brought up regarding the lease of the aquatic lands, during the break I wrote out a short little policy, and I'd like to read it out loud, and if you're okay with that, we can put it into the state section.
I drafted one as well.
Oh. Well, then you go.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Mine says the city strongly supports legislation that gifts to the city the aquatic lands currently leased from the state at the marina, or reduces the lease rate to a nominal amount.
That sounds good. I'll give you mine if you want to compare.
Sure.
That's okay, Mr. Mayor. Des Moines supports a state law changing our aquatic lands lease to much less, as the marina provides access to the water through the fishing pier, and the breakwater protects the base of the pier as well as the boat moorage.
Yours adds a little bit more of the why, so I could support either one. Totally up to council.
Is there a suggestion, Melissa?
I'd support Councilmember Burgess. I think it's unique to our city, and it's what makes our aquatic lands maybe stand out versus in other municipalities.
Okay.
No offense to you, Tony.
Is there consensus to add that? Okay. There's consensus for that. So if you've got it written out, if you could hand it to the clerk so that way we make sure she's got the right wording on it.
Then, Your Honor, just going down these by category, the first section is called General Policies.
Before we jump?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I would yield to, I like the draft of this and its intent, but I think it may be useful to articulate to the state or whatever that, you know, we've leased the land, but we've improved the land and we're maintaining those improvements. And so that's really why we think that there's fair compensation to be adjusted here. And I think the why, yes, it improves the value of our marina and everything else and improves public lands, but the fact is, when it gets down to dollars and cents, why should they drop the lease? Because we increase public lands, or also because we are improving the property and maintaining that at our own expense? I think we need to make sure that it's meaningful, because when minds in the legislature who are not maybe knowledgeable of Des Moines start to consider this, they've got to have good reason to do it.
And I think Councilmember Burge's version reflects that. It's very specific about a few of the facilities at the marina, but it is the intent and what you can infer from that certainly, I think, encompasses what the description you just provided.
But if the more general one would be better for adding different things, then we could do that.
My general one talks nothing about improvements and all that sort of thing, whereas yours does.
And my only concern is that the state's going to look at this potentially amongst all the municipalities that have these leases. And we have an argument if we say we've improved the property, we're maintaining it, we're providing public access and everything else. If we don't make those statements, then why? You're the landlord. Why? And so I'm just trying to put myself in a legislative position and say, why should I consider this?
No, I understood.
And how could we do something that may help Des Moines, because we're not going to get treated special because we're Des Moines. We're going to get treated special because we have a reason.
And the intent of the positions is to, in a short and concise way, say, here's our position. Everything you're talking about is what would go into a long letter. That points into discussion with legislators, go into the whereases for a bill, things like that.
Fair enough.
Shall we continue?
Yes, yes. Okay. General policies.
And I'll admit, I don't think we've changed these for years because they're so general. They feed everything. Yep. So I'd suggest we drop down to the next section, intergovernmental positions, Metropolitan King County.
Jeanette.
Yes, I think that we should delete the second sentence in number 1A. The Des Moines should remain a provider of local human services. For one thing, it doesn't have anything to do with intergovernmental policies, and also it's not correct that because we don't provide human services, except maybe in the Parks Department. But anyway, so I think that second sentence should come out of there.
And for a little historical perspective, I don't remember exactly when that was put in, but it was added in there because we do provide funding to some human services agencies. We have about $78,000 in our budget every year that the Human Services Advisory Committee makes recommendations to the council as to how to divvy that up. And I think that was the reason why we put that sentence in there. Exactly why it was worded that way, I don't recall. I think it was actually before 2001, 2002, somewhere around there. Perhaps it could say Des Moines should remain a funder of human services. to the extent the budget allows.
My proposal is to take the sentence out.
Yeah. Is there support for that proposal?
Which one are we working on, one or two?
Contrast between
We're on
regional
the-
and local is the reason it's there.
Oh, we switched lines, okay. Oh, okay, never mind.
We're on here.
You're a different line there.
Yeah. Is there support to take out the,
Would it be appropriate to
Second
make these in motions to see if there's a second?
yeah, I suppose we could do that, yeah.
Okay, I'll move to take out the second sentence of A.
From 1A. Is there a second?
Second number.
Okay, a motion has been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Melissa?
Well, I always get nervous to remove something that we don't have a clear understanding of what it defines. And we could say senior services is a human service. And so if we go so far as to say that we decided we're not going to remain a provider of local human services, does that mean we're no longer going to support the food bank? Does that mean we're no longer going? I think that if it's been there for so long that no one can remember why it's there, but it's not causing a negative effect by saying we support local human services, then it's the old adage, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So I support leaving it there because I support human services, so.
Matt and Jeanette?
I also wonder if the intent was that Des Moines wanted to say if there were local human services to be provided, that we wanted to be the primary provider based on the needs of our community. At this point, I don't see the need to remove it.
Okay.
Jeanette?
Yeah, when I was on the council in 1994-95, there was an amount that was used for human services that came from the county through the federal government. It was like a block grant thing, and then the city council decided where that money was going to go. So it wasn't actually city revenue that was used for the human services. And my understanding is that now it's from the city budget that we pay for human services. And so I think that's one of the things we need to discuss on Saturday, if that's one of the things and how much of that we should or shouldn't be doing.
The two things that I recall, I think the funds that you're talking about are community development block grants, and usually those are for specified things. For example, part of the sidewalks related to the improvements we just did on 216th came out of community development block grants.
It was for human services.
Some funding for senior services comes out of community development block grants, and also I think home assistance, and
At that time, it included the food bank, so.
In Your Honor, Councilmember Burge is right, in the late 90s, and it was up till right around 2000 that we were getting an allocation of CDBG money on a pass-through basis from King County that we could use for some of those sort of things. All those monies have dried up. The CDBG money that's left are for the things you've been describing.
Right, and what I was going to say is I'm not sure when, but the council, I think it may have been prior to my time on the council, even back in '97, the council adopted a policy goal of funding human services through grants to local agencies with a target of 1% of the overall budget for the city. We haven't approached that in well in excess of a dozen years, if not that. That's been the discussion in the past on it. I am a strong believer that there's a safety net that needs to be out there, and I think that there's a lot of, because the city itself is not the one providing the services, the fact that we do it by grants and give it to local entities that are providing services directly to our residents in the form of the food bank, in the form of I believe suicide prevention line is on there.
There's a dozen and a half, sexual assault, Dawn.
Yeah. There's that they maximize the use of those funds that they do receive, and that it does provide a safety net for those in our community who without it would be in dire straits. And for that reason, I can't support the motion. Is there any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to take out the second sentence from 1A, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Or yes.
Failed 2-4. Okay. Are there any other policies for King County?
I just have a question.
Melissa?
Are we, and perhaps somebody was on the Transportation Committee, are we still in support of the cutbacks? Is the year 2000 still the year we want to memorialize, or? I'm just curious why that year was chosen.
Because that's the first year of cutting back that Metro did on existing routes. The 189, I think that's the year the 189 went away. Now, there has been an expansion of service through the Rapid Ride, but all the other normal services have been cut back. And with the work of the Regional Transit Committee, it's possible there's going to be additional cutbacks as well. 2000, my opinion is it's pie in the sky because there's been so much more cutback since then, but it's a good benchmark.
Okay.
Could we say
Carmen?
since instead of in? Since 2000? Just
Yeah.
change
Is that a
the word?
motion to change the
I'll
word
second the
in the
motion.
sentence?
That's a good idea.
Okay. Discussion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes.
I like that one.
So that's C2. Okay. All right. Melissa?
On page 122 of the attachment, this G, the city supports reinitiation of 24-hour booking at the Regional Detention Center in Kent. Is that still applicable to us in light of SCORE, or is that something we really don't need to?
I would leave it in there because very occasionally there may be someone we arrest that really needs to go to county jail.
Okay.
Anyone who's arrested for a felony is and does time for felony doesn't do that in our jail, so I think we should leave that one in there.
Okay. Is that it for King County? Okay. And the state of Washington?
I got one here.
Yeah, Dan.
Okay. Page 122, paragraph E. It talks about any deregulation should not result in increases for local ratepayers. Every year, we have a bill come through from Puget Power saying they're asking for a rate increase. And are we going to protest those increases? That's what I'd like to see.
Well, this deals directly with electric utility deregulation and the concerns with
And let's look at both
kind
sides
of
the
the
street.
Enron issues, you know, that cropped up.
I look at both sides of the street there.
So you'd like to add an issue then, or add a line?
Yeah, add an issue, because if they pay more for rates, they have less to buy in the city. There's less revenue.
What section would that go under if it were to be considered?
Well, I think this, putting it in, I think it would be more appropriate to go into interjurisdictional and regional. However, the state Utilities and Transportation Commission is the body that approves or disapproves rate increases, so it could go in either one. If I understand what Councilmember Caldwell is saying, that every time Puget Sound Energy comes forward with a rate increase, he's asking that we take a look at that and then comment on that as to whether or not we can support what it is they're asking for. That is something that we have never done. That as the small city of Des Moines, we leave that to the larger powers that be, the rate or the customer advocacy type groups, to take a good hard look at those rate increases, because the filings are massive, the amount of information that goes into those. I really don't have the staff expertise to really, or staff time to really dig into those and determine whether or not those are reasonable and adequate rate increases.
Yeah, where I'm coming from on is these rate increases, like Puget Power merged, so they had the gas company and the electric company. And I was originally had electric and gas of both systems of the house. Well, they always go up together, and there's no ways to stop them. But if more cities got together and started protesting these rate increases, maybe they do their homework closer. There shouldn't have been a merger in the first place. And there shouldn't have been a merger to an Australian company.
Yeah. Well,
but anyway, that's where I'm coming from.
Okay.
So I'll withdraw my comments.
Okay. 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 Is there any other state, Melissa?
I just had a question. We had conversation at this time last year about supporting investigations into the streamlined sales tax. Doing anywhere with that?
Nope.
Okay, awesome.
Oh, no, we tried, we asked. I met personally with the Director of Department of Resources, Susan Del Bene, and said we really want to find out whether or not streamlined sales taxes are being appropriately distributed, and really the only thing we got is, we'll get back to you on that.
Well, I know
They
what's
never did.
interesting is that whenever you buy something on Amazon.com or where you pay sales tax on it and you put in our zip code, it defaults to Seattle every time, and you've got a hand go in.
And we have been, we do see sales tax coming in. We do get the report of every single payer of sales tax to the city. We do see Amazon.com. And we have been repeatedly assured by the folks at DOR that just because that zip code goes to Seattle, that's the post office thing. They use a slightly different system. The other thing, talking about Amazon.com in particular, my wife and I recently purchased something on Amazon, and it came back, and there was no sales tax assessed on that. And I asked the question, and the reason for that is remember, Amazon has a whole bunch of affiliate companies that they work with. So if the affiliate company is located out of state and doesn't have a physical location, all they're using Amazon for is the billing mechanism. They use Amazon's boxes, and it looks like it came from Amazon, but it came from ABC Company, and they're not required to collect sales tax there.
One state policy issue, something that's being considered at the state level this session, the governor actually announced it, the possibility of streamlined business and occupation tax. And Tony and I have had some conversation on this. One of the concerns that I've had has been, and I'm not a fan of the B&O tax, and when our revenue stream builds up, I'd like to see it go away, the B&O tax go away. But the concern I have is what standardization might be required by the state in terms of streamlining B&O, what impact that might have. For example, we may have a fairly high threshold for gross revenues that would be subject to the tax, but the state might have a lower level depending upon what the compromise would be in terms of what happens with streamlining that. Exemptions, what were a couple of the other things that I brought up that were concerns?
And exemptions is one. The amount that, the trigger for when you start paying and when you don't. And actually, a third one that I find very interesting that the City of Seattle is worried about is the ability to audit. Right now, Seattle, when they do sales tax and B&O tax audits, they find a lot of errors and they get them corrected. Well, with the way the bill's been written, all 189 pages of it, if the state has just done an audit, the city cannot go in and do one. And there's a time frame. If the audit was done the last 2 years or something like that, the city cannot do an audit. And if DOR is about to do an audit in 6 months or a year, the city cannot go in and do an audit. The other curious thing that I learned is when the state does do an audit for right now on sales taxes, and let's say they find out that somebody was reporting their sales taxes wrong and the city of Des Moines is owed $1,000 from the last 3 years worth of time and they weren't remitting it, we'll get our $1,000, but the state keeps the penalties and any interest on the amount that would have been ours. So Seattle estimates that their B&O losses could be between $23 and $46 million if the state were to take it over. So I'm sure that there's an impact on us. That bill also includes a streamlined business license aspect as well, where we would no longer be able to require application and issuance of our own business license. We could require a business license, but the state would take over the process of taking the application, taking in the funds, sending us our share, and of course deducting their administrative charge, which can't be more than 1% of the revenue. And I think we would also be limited as to what our business license amounts could be. Currently, we're at $75, which is kind of in the middle of the road when I look at what other cities are charging. I don't know what the amounts would be. I haven't delved into that whole bill very much yet, but that one very much frightens me.
I'm wondering if there should be a policy written in here that says that we would oppose the streamlining of the B&O tax unless it equitably made...
Unless it kept cities whole.
Yeah, something along those lines.
A second that.
Is there interest in, okay.
I think, can we approve it? Yeah, I think I'd like to see the language too, though, before we, I mean, it's something we can visit and add to it at maybe a future meeting.
Well,
Unless, yeah.
So we're going through this tonight, and there is a staff recommendation to add a position regarding liquor revenues and the tax increment on that. It's right behind the first page, which I will make the motion here in a minute. But we're doing a retreat this weekend, and it's very possible as we get the collective together, we come up with more things that we may want to put on here. So I don't know. I'm wondering if we should add whatever proposals we have tonight and see what comes out of the weekend, and then move this for a second reading and final approval to the following Thursday or next council meeting. I'm not sure what the impact would be either.
My recommendation would be to adopt changes tonight and then from Saturday make whatever additional changes we want to. There's nothing that says we can't revisit the policies once we've adopted them. But I think, this is a short legislative session. It's only 60 days. All the hearings are going to be held in the first 3 weeks. We're now in the second week of the session. And I think we need to be able to provide staff guidance in terms of what our position are. A lot of these things are already settled, but we formally need to be able to, because it's a new council, be able to give staff the guidance to be able to weigh in and say, City of Des Moines does not support this or does support that. The next council meeting at which we would adopt any changes from Saturday won't be until the 26th.
Right. Okay.
Which will be after one cutoff, I believe, in terms of when bills either have to be out of the House committee or past the House, or their House origin. So it's a timing issue because of the short legislative session. And again, there's no reason why we can't revisit this on Saturday to consider additional amendments to it.
Okay.
But at least to have a base for staff to be able to work from in terms of advocating for our the council's position.
That's
Does that sound like a reasonable?
That's excellent. I didn't,
agree with that.
I was wondering about those timelines, that's why I asked the question. So can I go ahead and make the motion to have staff recommend some language adding a position regarding the liquor revenues and the tax increment financing?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any comments?
You mean that we would discuss later, or they put it in for?
Well, they're going to have to come up, my intent is they're going to have to come up with some language. I mean, the way the state liquor system is running is going to change, and that could affect the revenues that we get. And if I understand correctly, there is discussion about possibly limiting or minimizing what we're going to get in the future. So I would, at this point, like to take a position that, at minimum, we want to protect the revenues that we are getting from the state liquor sales. And I think we need to, as a city, be able to determine what, I don't know, the cost of the licenses would be or whatever as the law changes mid-year.
I've written 2 positions right here, right now. I can read them to you.
Go.
Okay.
The city opposes the state's proposal to streamline the collection of B&O taxes and issuance of business licenses unless the new processes are revenue neutral to cities.
Okay, that answers that.
And then on the liquor items, the city opposes any reduction in state shared liquor revenues.
Starting point. Sure.
Yeah.
Everybody comfortable with that? Okay.
Good.
So add those 2 in as policies.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Do we need to take a vote on that because we have 2 motions on it, Dave?
Sure.
I mean, we have agreement, but you need it for the record, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We're not on the
we're not
final
on
yet.
that.
We're still going section by
We're still on
section.
line. Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
I just thought that you have to.
So all those in favor of the B&O tax streamlining language that Tony outlined,
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Okay, it passes. All those in favor of the language relative to the liquor tax that Tony's drafted, the language for that. I'm getting inartful at about close to 10 o'clock. Raise your hand and say aye.
Aye. Okay.
So
In
you're in
regards
favor of that?
Yeah,
In regards to tax increment financing,
You figured out the answer.
the city supports legislation that creates a true tax increment financing mechanism.
I'm sorry.
Not sure how that works anymore.
The city supports legislation that creates a true tax increment financing mechanism. Currently, we have basically a mother may I process where you have to propose a project. There's only so many that will be allowed. The value of the project will only be so much. It doesn't encapsulate all the potential taxes that could be used to fund the infrastructure that would be needed to support a development. And there's been various bills bouncing around in the legislature, but in my opinion, this is a tool that cities, counties, and the state needs to give us a level playing field when we're competing for economic development with other states. And for our 2 new council members, it's pretty simple. If a project comes in and it creates new property tax revenue because it's a new building that wasn't there before, if it creates new sales taxes, B&O taxes, whatever taxes it might create, you can dedicate some of that money and use it to serve as debt on bonds you might have to sell in order to build the infrastructure improvements to support the development itself. And you can thank the Speaker of the House for his many, many years of opposition to this. So in very simple terms, we would like to see true tax increment financing, and that's why I wrote this in this manner. It's general in nature, and it gives gives you and me a lot of flexibility when we take a look at bills and decide if we can support them or not. So again, the city supports legislation that creates a true tax increment financing mechanism.
Make a motion to approve as read.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor of adding the policy, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Okay.
And before you leave page 124, which is the very last item, double D, the city supports amendments to binding interest arbitration criteria as outlined in AWC's 2011 legislative priorities. It's 2012, and I can tell you that changes to interest arbitration are part of AWC's discussion. If it will look exactly like what we offered last year, I don't know, but I think it will be pretty close. And as a matter of fact, the Seattle Times has gone on record as endorsing that in an editorial a couple of months ago. We could just change that. The city supports amendments to binding interest arbitration criteria to create a more level playing field. Might be one way to put it. Or just stop at, we support amendments to in binding interest arbitration.
Do you understand what what that issue is?
It has to do with the ability of police and fire, and there's a couple of other union types, but mostly police and fire. They have the ability to take cities to binding interest arbitration when you are in disputes with them regarding a variety of things, most importantly having to do with contract negotiations. Unfortunately, when you read the law, it's very heavily weighted toward the union side. For example, our ability to pay an arbitrator's award is not part of the criteria. Our financial abilities to do that are something he or she cannot take into account. The way it basically works is we have our contract that we think is fair, the union has theirs, and then we have to come up with a set of comparable cities for the arbitrator to take a look at. And so we'll come up with some that look good to us, they'll come up with some that look good to them. The arbitrator often kind of splits the baby, picks 4 of ours, 4 of theirs, and oftentimes we'll get something in our contract that we didn't want simply because 5 of the 8 comparables have it. We think that is very unfair. There's a whole bunch of other things I could tell you, but that's the major issue.
I'm going to make this I'm going to make this simpler. I'm going to move to just strike 2011. Is there a second to that motion?
Yeah.
Okay, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Pina. All those in favor of the change, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously.
And Your Honor, I would then, on the very next page, double E, I would do the exact same thing regarding public records.
Yeah.
Just remove the 2011.
Okay. I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Musser. This is to amend EE on page 125 to essentially eliminate the date there relative to proposals to manage public records requests. All those in favor, please raise your hand, say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously.
Your Honor, the next item I see that we probably ought to talk about removing is 4A. We talked about that last year, decided to leave it in there for just what the heck. But I don't see anywhere in the future, short, middle, or distant, that is something that's going to be coming to Puget Sound. The state is having enough trouble just keeping the current system afloat, unintended. And the county had created a ferry district, and they got rid of it because they needed the property tax for other purposes. I just don't know if you want to keep that in there as a policy.
They sure did get our property tax, extra property tax on that, didn't they?
Uh-huh.
Is there a motion to delete item 4A?
I so move. To delete.
Motion made by Councilmember Scott, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Pina. All in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Passes 5-1.
Why are we taking it out?
Because there's no hope in it happening. That's
Was
it.
there anything under
It's going
federal?
to the
Were we all
federal.
good with all the federal? Skip right over it.
These are-
Like they're gonna be.
Oh, yeah, I saw nothing in federal that I would recommend changing.
It's the-
Okay. Actually, policy for interjurisdictional regional, under that same thing, item D, it says the city supports completion of the higher speed south access route from the State Route 509 extension of the south end of the airport during phase 1 of the project to be funded by the Port of Seattle. I would like to make a motion to take out during phase 1 of the project.
Second?
Motion has been made and seconded. The reason to take that out, I serve on the State Route 509 Executive Committee, and the discussions that we've been having in terms of looking at what the initial phase of 509 should look like in terms of being able to package it in such a way that you might actually be able to finance construction of the highway. Requires looking at a limited number of options, both, all of which, by the way, have a toll component to it. The initial phase 1, and I forget whether it's which version of the project, I think it's option C now, which is being studied more closely, does not have the high-speed access, south access to the airport, but provides a temporary 24th, 28th access into the airport. The other thing that C has is they drop the high occupancy vehicle lanes in order to be able to afford, and the ramps, in order to be able to afford, to get the package below $1 billion in order to build the road. You know, when you talk about numbers like that, it's crazy. The high-speed access to the airport would not be in would no longer be in phase 1. It would be in phase 2 when the HOV lanes would be added. So deleting that language would reflect the current state of the project.
I'll make a motion.
The motion's already been made and seconded, but all those in favor of the change, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously.
A question about C. With all of the joint midway studies, was the city of Kent wanting C to happen? Why do we want it to happen? What's the relevance of it?
As I recall, in the discussions that we had regarding the Envision Midway, in conjunction with the city of Kent, we were talking about how that area was going to develop. And for the new council members' benefit in particular, and even the newer council members' benefit in particular, we had discussions. We actually received a grant. Kent received a grant, and we partnered with Kent to look at land use and transportation-related improvements in an area that essentially runs from the old Kent Highlands landfill through our Pacific Ridge south on both sides of Pacific Highway down to 272nd. And the conversations that we had dealt with everything from land use. In the case of Kent, they are also looking at some of their growth management requirements, where they might put housing. For example, some of what they're looking at would be to increase some density around the areas where future sound transit stations may be, so down at 272nd and around Highland Community College. One of the discussion items that came up was the limited number of connections between this side of I-5 and that side of I-5. And one of the discussions was the ability from our council was a suggestion that you build a bridge across at 240th, which is a natural connection point on the other side over to Military Road. So
40th, where's this?
it currently, that goes by Lowe's, right, exactly. And then it makes the bend on the 30th, I think it is. So, you know, a overpass over I-5 connecting it with over to Military would actually enhance circulation and help alleviate.
It takes a lot of pressure off of Kent Des Moines Road and Highway 99, I-5, that whole conglomeration of intersections by putting a bridge over.
And it's pie in the sky, but, yeah.
It's beyond the drop-off.
They can't have that one,
Right. Jeanette?
Why would we be for that, but we're opposed to them extending South 228th any further west?
Okay, I'll explain that. 228 is the Cross Valley Connection Road that they built, and it currently goes to Military. It is supposed to be part of the State Route 509 project, and is supposed to connect over to State Route 509. All along, the connection is supposed to be within the State Route 509 right-of-way. And there have been indications that they were having it go all the way over to 30th into Des Moines and connect with 30th Avenue South, which, as you know, is residential
It's a
neighborhood.
street, right?
Right. So them wanting to put essentially an off-ramp for their truck traffic through our neighborhood was not acceptable to us, so we basically said we didn't want it to go any further west than the western boundary of the right-of-way for the 509 and I-5. That's what that was about.
I have no other changes or suggestions, Your Honor.
Okay.
A motion to adopt is.
Is there a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
And this is the second motion as amended by council.
Yeah. You want to read it?
I move to adopt the 2012 intergovernmental policies and position as amended by the City Council.
Formal second.
Motion made by Councilmember Musser, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Hina. Discussion? The only thing I'll say again is on Saturday, we'll have more discussion on this topic. We'll add to the end of the day so that we can have, if there's other issues we want to revisit or what have you. But in terms of being able to provide a baseline for staff for the next, until we adopt
The next day.
any changes. What's that?
The next day.
Oh, the next.
So in order to add this to the agenda, we need to have that posted by 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
When do you have it?
So you want to have a discussion of intergovernmental policies and positions as part of the agenda for Saturday?
Do we need to?
It can, in general, it can be part of your discussion of strategic objectives for the year.
If you're referencing my comment earlier, my intent was that not to have further discussion on this, but that, and I think, I understand why you need it now to go, and I absolutely am in favor of that. I'm just saying that if we come up with other positions that out of that, we can always, and as Mayor Kaplan pointed out, we can always put it back on an agenda and amend it.
Sure.
But he also pointed out that we wouldn't be doing that till the 26th, because we won't meet to take action between now and then. So I guess what I'm saying is, do we need to report it as an agenda item, or do we just need to be aware that if something comes up, we want to have it considered at a future meeting? I don't know.
Well, maybe a better way to handle it would be the discussion that we have on setting our long-term and short-term strategic objectives for the year would probably educate what changes need to be made, and that would give staff time to come back with the language that we would then consider either at the meeting on the 26th or a future
Right.
meeting. Does that sound like an acceptable way to go?
What's the term now? A year is the minimum, maximum length of time on these?
Yeah, these are considered every year.
Yeah, okay.
Each year we review these, so.
But if we need to take a look at them mid-year because an issue comes up, we can do that.
Right, yeah, we're not restricted in revisiting these.
Oh, and as a council, we can always take a formal position on a particular bill item that's out
Right.
there, so.
Correct.
Done that.
Correct. All right, motion's been made and seconded. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
I think.
Passes unanimously. And with that, we've come to the end of our agenda, and time has not expired. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem and seconded by Councilmember Musser. Our retreat is going to be on Saturday, January 14th, down at the Founders Lodge from 9 to 2:30. Public is welcome to attend, and we encourage you to. All those in favor of adjourning, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Motion passes. I missed that last time. And again, our retreat is this Saturday from 9 until 2:30. Next regular council meeting will be on Thursday, January 26th. We are adjourned.